Chapter 21 Adam's Song. Iron lying still soon gathers rust, a stagnant pool is slimy. The harp unplucked is thick with rust, most things not used grow grimy. The highway is the minstrel's home, he's working when he's playing. He's never lost if far he roam, he wanders when he's staying. I've gathered rust and dust too long, I need the wind and rain. I'll tell my tale and sing my song out on the road again. Adam sang aloud as he stepped out on the road leading west from St. Albans. Hoarfrost silvered every twig and holly leaf in the thicket beside the road, and when the sun suddenly came out, the whole world shone and glittered like the fairy country in the lay of Sir Orfeo. In the frozen ruts, thin layers of white ice broke under his feet with a tinkling sound. Overhead, great companies of rooks careered about in the sky, cawing and calling. It was nearly a week since Adam had left Delisle House. The bailiff and his wife had let him go without protest. It was easy to see that they had not been over-pleased to be saddled with the care of the minstrel's son. The porter, on the other hand, had given him a penny and a packet of food, and some careful directions about finding Roger. "Stay at St. Albans School," he said, "or go on to Ludlow, or come back here. Don't do any more seesawing back and forth from village to village, and try to land on your feet instead of your head." Agnes, curiously enough, had been much annoyed at his departure. She had scowled and pouted, and said crossly that she didn't see why he cared so much about a dog. Matthew had walked part way with him the first day, and seemed depressed when he said good-bye. "I don't suppose you'll come back," he said, "even after you get Nick." "I don't suppose I will," Adam had answered. He liked Matthew, but he did not want to go back to Delisle House without Roger. Idling about the great empty house when the Delisles were away was no life for a minstrel. His place was on the road. He had spent 3 days at St. Albans with Dame Malkin, and now he was on his way to Oxford, whither Perkin had gone with Nick. Yes, Nick was here, the dame had said, sitting hunched on a stool beside her fire, and beaming up at Adam with deep, wrinkled, frosty blue eyes. "I heard a scratching at the door outside and a whining, and when I went to open it, there he was with a broken leash trailing. He was thin as a twig, and his ears were all full of mud and burrs, but by my faith, he was happy. He jumped all over me, crying out for joy, and then he ran sniffing all over the house looking for you." "Where's he now?" Adam cried. The dame had looked miserable. "I couldn't keep him. It's winter time, and there is so little food. I gave him my dinner that day, and how his sides bulged out after he ate it. So Perkin took him with him. He was off to Oxford, begging his way. He said he could as well beg for 2 as 1. He's keeping him for you. He said you'd come to Oxford to see him." Adam stayed 3 days at St. Albans because Dame Malkin could not bear to let him go. He got his meals at the Abbey guest-house, but he slept in the cottage beside the fire, and in the long evenings he told his old friend of his adventures. "It's better than any minstrel's romance," she would sigh. "Eh, lad, no wonder you're taller and have a thinner line to your chin." The masters at St. Albans School welcomed him more affectionately than he had ever imagined they would, and once again he sang the Latin hymns with the choir at evensong. He marveled, as he looked at the schoolboys, how young they were, and he remembered with amazement that less than a year ago he himself had been as young as that. Now he was off for Oxford to find Perkin and to get Nick again. Among all the scholars at the university, surely there would be someone who liked minstrelsy and were not too poor to pay for it. He would stay there till spring, and then he would go to Ludlow to meet Roger. His heart was filled with a deep content to be out on the road once more. He sang over the song that he had made about it. A road, how clearly he remembered Roger saying it, was a kind of sacred place. If only he had his harp, he thought, and if only his shoes were not so worn. Dame Malkin had exclaimed over them. "You'll never get to Oxford on those soles," she cried. Country people wear wooden clogs to save their shoes. Couldn't you do that? I've an old pair you can have." "I couldn't walk miles in wooden clogs," objected Adam. "They'd break my feet. These were lost. They've got to." She had given him some rags to pad them with, but they were still uncomfortably thin on the hard, frozen ruts, and chilly, too. Now that his attention had been called to them, he kept examining them anxiously at intervals to see if the holes got any larger. He thought they did. Never having been to Oxford, he did not know just how to get there. Dame Malkin told him to be sure to go to Ewham, for Perkins's father lived there, and no doubt he would help Adam on his way. She showed him the road to Watford, which was sure to be the first stage of the journey. He came to Watford by noon and offered to tell the tale of King Horn at the inn in return for his dinner. Unfortunately, his memory failed him, and he got stuck in the middle of it. The words that Roger used to say would not come, and worse still, he could not remember what happened well enough to tell it in his own words. Somebody laughed as he stood red-faced and shamed, and several others, ignoring Adam altogether, began to talk about the weather. It was Candlemas Day, February 2nd, and the sun was shining. "If Candlemas Day be fair and bright, winter will have another flight," quoted a burly-looking man in a thick fur-lined mantle. "But if it be dark with clouds and rain, winter is gone and will not come again." He himself looked as if he were well-fed and warmly dressed enough not to care if winter stayed forever, but everyone else was pinched and thin and pale. Adam knew better than to try to regain attention by competing with the conversation. He contributed to it instead. "Si sol splendescat Maria purificante," he recited the Latin version of the old saw. "Major erit glacias post festum quam fut ante." The Latin startled the room into momentary silence, and Adam seized his chance. "I can sing, lordlings," he said. Without waiting for permission, he sang the song he made, and after that, "Winter wakens all my care." They liked the second one better. Then he told them news of St. Albans, how the hares and rabbits had eaten the bark off an apple tree in Master John's garden, all the way around the trunk as high up as they could reach, and the tree would die surely. How Harry the miller had not got his oats in yet, but his old ewe had had twin lambs 3 weeks ago. How the first pair of partridges had been seen in the wood near St. Stephen's Church the day that Adam got there. "Oh, spring is on the way," said the burly man, "though it comes slowly. Here, sir innkeeper, give this boy his dinner, and I will pay." When Adam was ready to go, the innkeeper told him to follow the River Colne to Rickmansworth, and gave him a message to take to his brother, the smith there. "Tell him the baby is a girl," he said. "We're naming her Cecilia. The christening will be after Martin's next Sunday, and tell him to be sure to come." Adam spent that night with the blacksmith of Rickmansworth, who was immensely pleased with the news about the baby. "That's the first girl born in our family in 99 years, he said. He was a freeholder and paid rent for his smithy and his holding of 4 acres instead of doing work for the lord of the manor. Besides the money payment, he had to give the lord 100 horseshoes a year, 50 with nails and 50 without, and he had to shoe the steward's hackney whenever it needed it, at a penny for 4 shoes. But that was far better than having to drop his own work just when he was busiest, and go ploughing or reaping for the lord. He was busy now, sharpening ploughshares and coulters for the spring ploughing, and Adam perched on the window-sill and shouted to him above the din of the anvil as he worked. "I wish I could get 2 shoes for half a penny," shrilled Adam. "Would you like them nailed on?" roared back the smith, and Adam had to admit that he would not. That night it snowed. The next morning the smith's eldest son put Adam on the way to Amersham. The snow had drifted thick on the road, but on the fields it lay thin, giving them a dappled effect. White where the little hollows were filled, and purply-brown where the humps were bare. It was easier to walk on the fields than in the road, but even so, before the day was half gone, Adam's big toe had come through his right shoe. When he came to a river and stopped to get a drink, he saw where little creatures had been before him. Rabbit footprints were there with the 4 feet together and the hind feet in line, like a Y. and there were the two deep, pointed tracks of birds, partridges, he supposed, and smaller tracks that might be thrushes. There was no sun today, and the wind was sharp. He was glad when he came into a beech wood, where the trees, bright green with moss, broke the wind but let light through. Under bushes where the snow had not penetrated, the fallen leaves still kept their deep gold color, so that the wood not only felt warmer than the open fields, but looked warmer too. From Amersham, Adam pushed on over the hills to Chipping Wycombe, which he was lucky enough to strike on a market day. He was tired out when he got there, and his big toe had come through his left shoe, but he found a welcome in the house of an apothecary, who was in high good humor because he had a successful day. The next day it rained, and the next. The third day was gray and heavy, with dark clouds lumbering across the sky, covering swiftly any patches of watery blue that might show for a little while. The road was so deep in mud and so steep and so slippery that Adam could not get any farther than Fingist that day. He was as tired at the end of it as if he had tramped 12 miles instead of 6.5. A cotter let him sleep in his hay barn, which was warm and fragrant. In the morning Adam put hay in his shoes to cover up the holes, but it did not make them any more comfortable. From Fingist to Watlington, the road went past the Bishop of Lincoln's palace and climbed high up over the ridge of the Chilterns, where it crossed the ancient Roman Icknield Way and plunged steeply down again on the other side. It went through thick woods and sometimes all but disappeared in a tangle of bushes and saplings. Scarcely anyone was out that day, and Adam felt lonely and sometimes even a little frightened as he struggled up the steep places, over rocks and around muddy pools that seemed to have no bottom. In that inn at Watlington was the steward of the Abbey of Bec, who spent his life, poor man, travelling from one manor to another of the Abbey's vast possessions, holding court and settling suits. In the last 2 weeks, he said wearily, he had covered 150 miles and held courts in 12 different manors. He had several men with him, and they all looked at Adam in surprise when he stepped forward in his shabby brown mantle, with his muddy toes sticking out of his shoes, and offered to entertain them with tales of love and adventure. At first the steward, who was an important man as well as a tired one, and had troublesome problems on his mind, waved Adam away impatiently, but then he called him back and told him he might try. Adam considered telling the tale of Haverlock, which he was sure he would not forget, but decided that the steward, who spoke French with a French accent, would not care for such a very English story. He was afraid to attempt the lay of Sir Orfeo without his harp, and so he sang songs instead. Something made him choose first a lullaby that his mother used to sing to him years ago. Lowly mine liking, my dear son, my sweeting. Lowly dear heart, my own son, my darling. Afterward, because the steward was connected with an abbey, he sang the Latin hymn Stabat Mater. This was wise, for the steward's head ached with weariness, and Adam's voice, so fresh and clear and soaring, carried him away far beyond the untidy little inn and the thought of tomorrow's travelling. When Adam stopped, the room was silent. Then the steward thanked him gravely and asked him why he was alone and where he was going. After Adam told his story, the abbot's steward said, "If when you get to Oxford, my son, you should decide that you would like to stay there and study, go to see my friend, the warden of Milton College. Tell him I sent you, and that I think he could be of help to you, and perhaps to him." He gave Adam 5 pennies, and Adam had supper and a share of a bed that night, and 3 pennies left over. He spent the next morning trying to buy a pair of shoes in Watlington for 3 pence. He thought perhaps someone might have a pair that was worn but still sound, which he did not need, but the only shoes he could find were so big that he walked out of them at the first step. So he had to set out for Ewelme in shoes with no soles at all. Soon the worn uppers flapped so irritatingly that he took them off and went on in his torn hose. When these too wore through, he limped on over the cold wet ruts in his bare feet. By mid-afternoon, the winter day began to draw in. Between the high, the wind-swept fields, the road stretched muddy and rutted toward bare purple woods. Here and there a swollen brook flooding the road reflected the cold, cherry-colored light of the setting sun. Shadows came out of the hedges as if driven out by the rising wind. Adam felt small and lost as he trudged along under the enormous sky. He thought of the little creatures that shared this edge of the world with him, the mice, the rabbits, the partridges, and felt sorry for them in the wind and cold. At last a valley opened before him. He saw a thin twist of blue smoke rising over the tops of trees, and heard faint, on the wind, the sound of church bells.